If you're going to be running for the rest of your life, why not truly master it? The way to mastery is to start early and to go through those 4 phases. You're only doing those high-end tactics from a solid grounding of knowing the basics. And then you're just enhancing the basic, enhancing the basic, enhancing the basic. In your training, does it ever seem like there's this idea that training can be simple? Or it's just running. We've been doing it for millennia. All we gotta do is put one foot in front of the other. Clearly that's all it is, right? And maybe if I run faster, or maybe if I run further, I'll get better. And that's what we think. We think that it's really simple. And then we learn about things like VO2 max, and we learn about lactate threshold, and long runs, and tempo runs, and hill sprints, and track intervals, and tune-up races, and race pace runs, and all this stuff, right? And we learn about nutrition and sleep, and it gets really complicated. It turns into this whole science, right? And there's books and books and books. Lots of these books here, they're on this topic. And it's easy to get over complicated with our training. But does that mean that we shouldn't learn more, and we shouldn't learn the intricacies, and we shouldn't apply all these little tips and tweaks? Now, what I want to share with you today is what it means to be consciously competent and unconsciously competent. So when I say this, what I'm talking about is the following. It means that if you don't know that you don't know something, if you don't know about 8-second hill sprints, for example, like a lot of you guys, you've been doing hill intervals for the entire time you've been running, right? And then you come along and you hear something crazy like run as hard as you can for 8 seconds and then take a 5-minute recovery and then do it again. Now, that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? It's like, why would I do that? And then you learn why, and you're like, oh yeah, makes sense. And then you learn another thing about nutrition, and about sleep, and about hacking growth hormone, and about alternation runs, and all this crazy stuff. And it gets more and more and more and more complicated. You didn't even know that you didn't know those things. And so before that point, you were what we would call unconsciously incompetent, right? You didn't know what you didn't know. And then you find out that there's something that could maybe help your training, but you don't know anything about it. But now you know it exists. And so now you're consciously incompetent. You know that there's something that you don't know. You know that there's something to be learned. And there are 4 steps to gaining mastery. And that's the second step, right? When you find out that there's something that you don't know. So the third step of that is once you decide that you want to learn something new for your training, then you become competent at it, but only if you think about it really hard, right? So this is the third step of mastery. We go from not knowing we don't know something to knowing that we don't know it. And now we can do it, but only if we struggle and try really hard. And this is where most people stop. And we call this conscious competence, right? So if you're doing a new skill, you have to think about it really hard. Maybe a new recipe or working on your car or something like that. That's tough, right? But a true master doesn't even have to think about it. A true master is able to have what we call unconscious competence, right? So here's the best example I have for you, and then we'll apply it to your training. So remember when you're learning to drive a car, and it's like all these things you have to do. You have to check the rearview mirror, and you have to make sure there's no cars coming over there, and put the blinker on, and hit the gas, and shift it into first, and remove the clutch, and you feel the seat underneath you. Is the height right? And you got the music playing, and someone's talking to you, and there's all this stuff going on, and where are you even going? You don't even know your directions, and there's a red light, and a yield sign. Oh no, it's all this stuff, and you can do it, but you have to be thinking about it. And then what happens? After not very long, you can do your makeup while you're driving and brush your teeth. You ever see that Mr. Bean episode where he's late for work or late for an appointment? So he goes into the back seat and he drives with his feet and he's brushing his teeth and he's combing his hair, right? Because he's mastered how to, I don't know if I'd call that mastery, but he's mastered how to drive. And so we can multitask. And this is what it means for your training. This is what it means for anything that you want to get good at, really good at in your life. I assume that you're here because you want to get really good at running and at your life. So let's apply this, okay? Now notice how the driving example, there's a million things going on, but once you learn how to do it, it's just, they get a bubble put around them and it's just one thing. It's just, I'm driving. And that frees up the bandwidth for you to now text. Don't do that, but a lot of people do. Or brush your teeth, or listen to the music, or an audiobook, or have a conversation. You can add in other things, right? Isn't that interesting? Because you mastered it, it took the complexity and made it simple. So I'm going to share with you what Einstein said about this, because Einstein's pretty smart. We would say he's a genius, right? And a lot of times we think when someone understands something really clearly, when they're a genius like Einstein was, that he must have all these circuits firing saying, if this happens, then do this, and what about this, and this model over here. And it's like this web of intricate complexity, right? And Einstein said, I'll read the quote for you here. It's a real simple quote. It says, keep it simple, keep it clean. Out of clutter, find simplicity. And so with your training, if it feels like there's a lot to learn, especially if you're in this group and you're getting information about lemon water for alkalinity and things like this, all these things that seem like a million things to be able to understand, I want to remind you that by putting a bubble around it and treating it like one thing, that it simplifies it. And the way to do that is to become, first, remember that you are consciously competent. So by being in this group, by applying these tactics to your training, you're going to have better training, but you're going to have to think about it. And remember that repetition is the mother of skill. What that means is that by doing it again and again and again and again, just like you did when you were driving, it's going to simplify. And you're going to not have to worry about knowing what pace to run. Now, that great book that we've referenced in here a few times, Matt Fitzgerald's book, Running by Feel. Now, if you take a beginning runner and tell them, just run how you feel, they're probably going to screw it up. They're going to go out really fast and they're going to burn out and they're going to get hurt, right? But if you have experience and you learn what your body can handle over time, and you learn how to pace, and you learn how to listen to your body when there's an injury coming up or your nutritional needs, then what happens is a bubble gets put around your training, and it's just simple now. You just run by feel. You just run what you know to be true. And so this is what I want for you guys, and I want to encourage you that if you think that training can get really complicated, that there's a couple things you can do. Number one is get help. And so you can take the masterclass that I offer, you can keep reading books, you can stay part of this group, you can ask questions, just get help to learn what the skills are, the skills of driving, right? You had to learn all those skills individually. Once you learn them, just repeat them again and again and again. Put pen to paper. Journal. If you have a journal, I highly recommend writing down these ideas as you go along, because if you listen passively, like on a YouTube video or even on this video right here, if you listen passively, after 2 weeks, you're going to forget 80% of what you learned. Now, if you put pen to paper and you just even take notes, even if you never review those notes, just the act of putting pen to paper ingrains it in your nervous system, and you're going to remember 50%. And then if you go back and review, well, then the sky's the limit. You can remember 100%. And so repetition is the mother of skill. So those of you who are training for a marathon, for a half marathon, when you're really far away from it, maybe you're 6 months away. Maybe if you're running Boston, you're 4, 5, 6, you're just about a little over 6 months away, right? And so that seems like a long time. And so what we tend to do is not think about our training and just run how we feel. And then as it gets closer, it's like, uh-oh, it's getting closer, I better train. Uh-oh, it's getting closer, I better do those things that I heard about. And then we try to take everything we learned, all the hill sprints and all the tempo runs and all the alternation runs and the glycogen depletion runs and all that stuff, and we try to dump it into our one chunk of marathon training. And what happens is we get overwhelmed. And you know, you're smart, right? So you want to be able to apply all of these things. And so you put them all into one section, and now you have a lot of running to do. And you have a lot that could go wrong. You have overtraining that could happen. You have burnout that could happen. You don't know what to do, so you get confused, and so you don't take right action. You just keep doing what you've always done, and then you get a similar result. But if early on, 6 months before, you start applying what you know, it's just like the driver's test. You know your driver's test is in 6 months, so you practice leading up to it. You don't just cram at the end, and maybe you do. But which way is going to lead to mastery? Cramming or learning it and repeating it? Repetition is the mother of skill, remember, until you're tested on race day. So I encourage you now that if you have a race that's coming up, that's okay, but I want you to think about a race that's maybe next season or 2 seasons from now. One that's really important to you, maybe a spring marathon that you want to do, maybe next fall or next summer. a race that's really important to you. I want you to start planning for that now. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but put pen to paper and maybe create a little chart, a little timeline of the training techniques that you've learned that you can put in, and start putting them in early. Maybe if it's a hill sprint, you start it now, even though you have 6 months. That's a good idea because it's part of your base training, right? Those of you who have taken the base training tutorial. Maybe if you want to learn how to do alternation runs, even though you don't do a 20-mile alternation run right now, 6 months away, maybe you just play with it and you do it once or twice and you get the feel for how it works, so that when it comes time to really do these specific workouts, you know how they go. You don't have to think about it. It's just, ooh, alternation run today. I'm gonna do it. And you go do it and life is easy. As opposed to, ooh, alternation run today. I gotta hit this pace faster than race pace and this one's slower, and I'm gonna have to find this flat course, and what is it doing metabolically, and should I eat before, all these things, right? It makes it too complex. So the earlier you do it, the more simple it's gonna get. Now, I'll leave you with this, that simplicity in your training does not mean just doing the basics. What it means is that your basics are now basically advanced. Now, I did Taekwondo for about 15 years, and I was fortunate enough to do a 2 or 3 day seminar with the son of the founder of Taekwondo. We went to Washington, D.C. And I remember after an entire day or maybe 2 days of training, he had us all sit on the floor, and he stood in the middle of us. And I don't remember what he said. He talked for half an hour. I don't remember any of it except one thing. And what he said was, if you know one thing through and through, then you know everything. Now think about that for a second. If there's something in your life that you've gone so deep, maybe it's what you work on for your job, maybe it's parenting, maybe it's running, maybe it's your spiritual faith. If whatever it is, if you know one thing and everything about it, everything you could possibly know, you've invested yourself. Isn't it funny how that path leads you to mastery in other areas of your life? And so even though you went really deep with whatever that is, maybe it's your faith, maybe it's the way that you love, maybe it's your health, maybe you have that really dialed in, right? Maybe it's your job, maybe you really kick ass at your job. If you've mastered that one thing, isn't it interesting that even though you understand it to the most minute complexity, to you, there's just one bubble around it. It's just one thing. It's just sewing, or it's just running, or it's just pie making. Just pie making. And you forget all of those intricacies. And that's what I want for you here with your running. And the way to mastery is to start early and to go through those 4 phases. You don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. But then once you know there's something out there that you can learn, that's phase 2. You've already begun the cycle. And then once you learn it, but you're not a master of it yet, that's where most people stop. And you're not a master yet. Take it one step further and repeat it until you are unconsciously competent. And from there, you're gonna have a lot of success in your running. Now, this is the long game, right? Your running is gonna go on and on and on for year after year, probably for decade after decade. For most everybody in this group, running is a way of life, right? So why not? If you're gonna be running for the rest of your life, why not truly master it? So that's all I have for you guys today. I felt really inspired by this quote by Einstein. And after speaking with one of my friends, one of you guys in the group here, Jeff, today, we were talking about business and just self-development. And he said, always go back to the basics. Always go back and simplify, simplify, simplify. And it doesn't mean that you don't use high-end tactics, but it means that you're only doing those high-end tactics from a solid grounding of knowing the basics. And then you're just enhancing the basic, enhancing the basic, enhancing the basic, right? So with your running, what are the basics? It's pretty simple. Building up volume with your running, building up strength, building up aerobic capacity, building mental acuity, mental toughness. It's very basic, right? And there's a million ways you can do all those, and don't get lost. Always come back to the basic and just become a master at those basics. That's really what we're here to do. This is what the elite runners do. They don't talk about all the crazy science. They just talk about their competency at the one thing that they do, and that is run. And they run really well. They don't overcomplicate it. So thank you guys for watching. I will catch you next week on a couple of live videos that I have coming up for you. Hey, if you like that video, give it a thumbs up.
and subscribe. And the best way to give back is to take the link for this video and send it to just one of your friends. It really helps us grow. We appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you on the next video.